Star Trek, From Ashes and Darkness by Heartlocket1004. Chapter 7, Attacked Year 1995, Khan, she's back, Katie called as she walked into the base's top level. Khan looked up from where he'd been bending over his desk in the private office at the end of the floor. He had been planning their next move with Otto, but he straightened as the familiar redhead entered the building behind his sister. Asher smiled briefly in greeting at the room's other occupants as she followed Katie to the other side of the floor. Khan met her by the door to his office, reaching out to hug her, an embrace she returned with a satisfied sigh. "How are you?" she questioned as she broke away, nodding at Otto as well as he nodded back once in greeting. "Still going strong," Khan answered, gesturing at the map on his desk as he led him back inside. "We've held on to Eastern Asia still, and with our new friends in Russia, the rest of the Middle East augment forces should fall quickly. Our strongholds in Australia and East Africa are also still standing, and we've yet to sustain any real damage even after all this time." "That's good," Asher said, a slightly rueful smile on her face as she glanced up at Khan. "But I meant, how are you?" Katie coughed, hiding a chuckle, while Khan swiveled amused blue eyes on the slight woman beside him. "I am fine, as always," he replied lightly, before adding in a lower voice, "though I missed you." "I missed you, too," Asher smiled softly. "It's been a long 4 months." "Where's Blasko?" Otto asked, bringing him back to the subject of Asher's return as he looked around for her partner, Dmitry Blasko. Khan's posture also shifted just slightly as he both figuratively and literally switched into leader mode, while Asher answered, "He's in medical, getting an examination. He was in an accident in Italy 2 days before we left Europe, and we wanted to make sure his bones had reconnected correctly." "Accident?" Katie asked while Otto nodded and shut the office door, and Khan explained briefly, "There was a bomb, possibly set up by the South American augments. They've been terrorizing Europe in addition to North America recently, trying to get an edge to push an advantage." "That doesn't sound good, and I wasn't told," Katie muttered, frowning and glancing at Otto, who answered, "No, it isn't, and I was going to debrief you on it later this afternoon, after you'd rested from your mission in Pakistan. We only got the news after Asher called in to report Blasko's status and what had happened." Katie nodded once, while Khan turned back to Asher and asked, "And London?" "London's decided, they're siding with us," Asher informed them, breaking the tension just slightly as she reported on her mission. Katie smiled briefly in relief, but Khan remained impassive, waiting. "But France and Germany are holding out," Asher confirmed his suspicions with a grim nod. "Maltuvas's domain is clearly getting restless. I heard the French president speaking worriedly about the pressure Maltuvas has been exerting on them. He's also been expanding his influence in Western Northern Africa." "I still can't believe that Merc * is the one controlling Central," Katie muttered, her Hindi accent appearing briefly amidst her strong British one. "He was one of the best in the facilities, even if he was not the most level-headed or best fighter," Otto reminded her calmly, the voice of logic to Katie's passion. "And I'd say he's probably feeling threatened by our continued advances around his area," Asher agreed, "with London, and if we were to win France and Germany, we surround his territories and close him off. He has to recognize that it would make him an easy target. He's just also generally more likely to want to stretch his own rule," Katie commented. "He probably doesn't like the fact that Khan's controlling over a quarter of the planet." She grinned at the thought, while Otto shook his head at her in exasperation. A small smile flickered across Khan's face before he was all business again as he questioned, "You're certain London's allying with us?" "Yes," Asher confirmed. "After your calls with them, they always debated the pros and cons, but decided that, quote, Khan is ruthless enough, and powerful enough to take what he wants eventually." Katie snorted in amused agreement while the augment himself just listened stoically as Asher continued, "So they opted to negotiate and ally with you while they still could. They won't back out of the agreement, though I'd recommend we keep an eye on it for a while longer." "I'll send Rivera," Khan agreed, his eyes darting down at and around the map on his desk as he planned aloud, "maybe with McPherson." "You sure that's a good idea?" Asher questioned, raising a brow, but Otto pointed out calmly, "Rivera knows how to keep things professional on the job." "Yeah, but Liam doesn't," Asher countered. "Even though it's been 10 years, you'd think the two were just starting to date from the way he acts. But he will listen to her, and she will keep to protocols," Otto returned, and Asher conceded as Khan repeated, "So, it's decided, Rivera and McPherson will go scout London next." "Or, what's this, Khan?" Katie teased. "You won't send our best spy? I wonder if it isn't you who can't distinguish personal from professional." She winked cheekily at Asher, who laughed lightly while Khan raised a brow. "Katie," Otto silenced her pointedly, or tried to. They all knew it wouldn't last very long. Katie was the only person who could tease Khan, aside from perhaps Asher and Otto, not that the latter really did, and get away with it, a privilege she shamelessly abused. "Asher, you and Blasky are to take the rest of the day off," Khan ordered, ignoring Katie's joking as he looked around the room. "You'll be back on regular shift starting tomorrow morning." They all nodded, recognizing the termination of the meeting. At least for the moment, they would rejoin again with some of the rest of their leadership team, and Rivera and Liam McPherson when they sent out the new orders. Katie hugged Asher briefly, murmuring a swift, "Glad to have you back, Asher," before she waved goodbye, heading out to get work done in her own office. Otto also hugged Asher briefly, silently conveying his relief at her safe return, before he walked out after Katie, closing the door once more as he left Khan and Asher alone. Asher moved closer to Khan, wrapping her arms around him as she said quietly, "What else has been happening?" "Nothing we cannot handle," Khan answered, shaking his head. "There have been a few scuffles, especially in Africa and Australia, but as I said, they're still fine. A rebellion tried to start in Pakistan, which is why Katie was there, but it too has been dealt with." Asher sighed, shaking her head. Leaning her head against his chest, she murmured, "It's getting worse, Khan." If Khan had been different, he would have pulled a face. Instead, he answered calmly, "The war is what is necessary at the moment, you know that." "I know," Asher answered with another sigh. She had hoped against hope that, after Khan and their team had broken out of the Chrysalis project, they would be able to prevent the war that had been on the brink of happening for years. And for a while, they had. Under Khan's leadership, their team had been able to infiltrate many nations over a period of 6 years, and negotiated many terms towards building a world of peace for both them and the humans that started to fall under Khan's rule. But other augments started to get wind of Khan's growing power, and started to join in a battle for world dominance. By 1991, tensions had risen once more as several groups of augments took over more than 40 of the world's nations by force, overruling the humans and reducing their subjects to little more than slaves. Then, 1992 had happened. Two separate groups of augments, one led by Maltuvis in Eastern Europe, and one led by an augment called Rodrigo in South America, had launched attacks on the nuclear plants in France and the United States respectively, and all hell had broken loose, literally. The humans in the United States, one of the few nations that had held out against augment rulership, had retaliated strongly, while France was pressurized by most of Europe, which had already fallen under Maltuvis's control. Wars broke out everywhere, as other pockets of augment groups joined in, vying for world power, and Khan's group had been forced to intervene soon after. That had been 3 years ago. But it's stretching on for longer than anyone anticipated. Asher continued softly, "The body count around the world has reached almost 30 million, Khan, and relations with the others, particularly the humans, are fragile at best because of it. I will keep us safe, we will not fail," Khan answered dismissively, and Asher deadpanned, "You're so full of yourself, aren't you? And you can't resist it," Khan answered with a slight teasing smile, and Asher had to laugh, shaking her head at him as she looked up at him. The worry was still there, but as Khan leant forward and pressed a soft kiss on her, Asher couldn't help but think that maybe things would look up, couldn't help but hope. Asterisk 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 year 2259, Admiral Marcus, Kirk's voice replied as the group in the med bay, and the whole crew aboard the Enterprise, listened to the transmission between the two Starfleet-led officers. "I wasn't accepting you, that's a hell of a ship you got there." Asher glanced at Khan, who had tensed as he stood, still before her. "The warship you mentioned?" she asked Khan softly, and he nodded as he confirmed, "the USS Vengeance." Asher nodded tightly as they listened to Admiral Marcus say flatly, "And I wasn't expecting to get word that you'd taken Harrison into custody, in violation of your orders." Khan's jaw clenched, and Asher took his hand in hers, rubbing circles as Jim replied smoothly, "Well, we had to improvise when our warp core unexpectedly malfunctioned, but you already know that, sir." Asher raised a brow at Jim's pointed comment, while Admiral Marcus replied sharply, "I don't take your meaning." "Well, that's why you are here, isn't? To assist with our repairs?" Jim answered, and Asher almost snorted. The young captain was a lot smoother than she had given him credit for. Jim continued his indirect jabs at the Admiral as he continued casually, "Why else would a head of Starfleet personally come to the edge of the neutral zone?" There was a pause, and then Jim asked, his voice a little tighter, "Is there something I can help you find, sir?" "Where is your prisoner Kirk?" the Admiral demanded, and Khan tensed instantly. Asher was also stiff, though she relaxed in some relief as Jim replied firmly, "Per Starfleet regulation, I'm planning on returning, Khan, to Earth, to stand trial." Khan remained tensed as Admiral Marcus sighed, stating disappointedly, "Well, shit, you talked to him. Exactly what I was hoping to spare you from. I took tactical a risk when I woke that bastard up." Asher bristled instantly, and her eyes narrowed as they listened to Marcus say flatly, "Believing that a superior intelligence could help us protect ourselves from whatever came after us next." He sighed before he continued firmly, "But I made a mistake, and now the blood of everybody he's killed is on my hands, so I'm asking you, give him to me, so I can end what I started." Khan's jaw tightened, before his eyes narrowed, and Asher pursed her lips as Jim's voice asked, a hint of contempt in his tone, "And what exactly would you like me to do with the rest of his crew, sir? Fire at them at the Klingons and end, 72 lives? Both Khan and Asher heard the slight pause before Jim named the number of torpedoes still primed as weapons, and Asher frowned while Khan pursed his lips. It seemed, despite any misgivings he might have regarding Khan, Captain Kirk was willing to at least give Asher the benefit of the doubt. Start a war in process, Jim finished, and Admiral Marcus countered. He put those people in those torpedoes, and I simply didn't want to burden you with knowing what was inside of them. Bones tensed at the Admiral's words while Carol's eyes were wide and filled with denial. This wasn't her father. It couldn't be. You saw what this man can do all by himself, the Admiral continued, unaware that the whole crew could hear him, that his daughter, Khan, and Asher could hear him. Can you imagine what would happen if we woke up the rest of his crew? Khan's jaw locked while Asher's eyes flashed with anger as Admiral Marcus scoffed. What else did he tell you? That he's a peacekeeper. He's playing you, son. Don't you see that? Asher glared at the intercom speakers as the Admiral tried to persuade Jim, informing the young captain, Khan and his crew were condemned to death as war criminals, and now it is our duty to carry out that sentence, before anybody else dies because of him. There was a momentary silence, clearly Admiral Marcus waiting for Jim to say something, but the younger man, either from hesitance or from distrust, didn't reply, and Asher pursed her lips as Admiral Marcus demanded, I'm going to ask you again, one last time, son, lower your shields, tell me where he is. There was another long pause, before Jim finally replied, he's in engineering, sir. Khan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully while Asher breathed sharply in relief as Jim added, but I'll have him moved to the transporter room right away. I'll take it from here, Admiral Marcus replied, and then the intercom cut. There was a long silence in the med bay before Asher finally noted, at least Captain Kirk appears to have a conscience. Bones glanced at her, while Khan said flatly, yes, I noticed that about him almost instantly as well. Asher glanced at Khan sharply, examining him, when suddenly they all felt the ship moving. What's happening? Asher asked, confused, and Bones explained with a resigned sigh, we're moving at warp again, at least there's that. He came over to start examining Khan, passing a small scanner over Khan's body, but Asher was worried at the look on Khan's face. He was staring at her with a worried frown, and her fears were confirmed as Khan informed Bones flatly, if you think you are safe at warp, you're wrong. His eyes finally moved off of Asher's face to glance back over his shoulder, right at Carol Marcus. Note, Merc is Hindi for idiot, I think. I translated it on the internet, because I do not actually speak Hindi, so I apologize if I got it wrong. Central was code for most of Europe and North and West Africa during the Eugenics War period. Chapter 8, Warp Year 2259. Carol stared at Khan for a moment before turning on her heel and running out of the med bay, and Bones glanced after her while Asher tugged on Khan's hand. He looked back down at her, and she asked, what's warp? What's warp? Bones repeated, sounding scandalized at her question on what he considered common knowledge, but Khan ignored him as he explained to Asher, the universe discovered a means of traveling faster than the speed of light almost 2 centuries ago. Now, it is very common, especially on Starfleet ships. So, it's kind of like lightspeed from Star Wars? Asher asked, and Khan shrugged as he explained, almost yes. Obviously the physics is more sound, since warp actually works while lightspeed was from science fiction. Coming from a genetically engineered 90s man in the year 2259, Asher observed, and Khan cracked a smile. It was gone almost instantly however as the ship suddenly rocked violently. Asher grabbed Khan instantly, pulling him down on top of her as they braced themselves against the medbed while the guards and Bones all went tumbling around as the ship was attacked, shuddering from the impacts from the Vengeance's gunfire. Asher grit her teeth as Khan held them both in place while glancing around with narrowed blue eyes. When the ship suddenly swung around, Bones yelped as he went crashing around the bay, bumping into guards, while the two augments remained locked on the bed, the metal frame creaking under Khan's tight grip as they held their position. The ship finally stopped moving, entirely. We're out of warp, Bones said in disbelief from where he was lying on the ground, while Khan lifted himself off Asher and glanced down. Asher, he asked, and she confirmed, I'm okay. I'm not, Bones groaned as he got up, glancing around as he dusted himself off with a wince, and I don't think we'll be for much longer, either. How the hell did he catch us in warp? Admiral Marcus's ship has volatile warp capabilities, capable of an advanced form of warp that allows it to track and follow other ships going at warp, Khan answered, and they all stared at him. How? Bones struggled to form his question. How is that possible, and how do you know that? The science is surprisingly simple, though almost impossible to create in reality due to sheer size and expense, and I know, Doctor, because I created it, Khan answered flatly, and Asher shook her head. You're going to have to catch me up on what kind of insane science this world revolves around, she sighed, and Bones chimed in, we'll have to live that long first, sweetheart. Khan's eyes narrowed at the other man, but they were interrupted as the ship shook violently once more, and Bones cried, he's shooting at us. Well, that is what men of power such as Marcus do once they've caught their escaping prey, Khan replied flatly, and Bones retorted, "Oh, yeah, thanks for that. Real nice guy you've got there." He gave Asher a look, but she just shook her head as she said, "We've got to do something. We're sitting ducks if we can't move," which I'm assuming is the case since we weren't moving before going into warp, or now. "Our warp core was damaged," Bones informed her grimly. "Jim probably took a hell of a chance even sending us into warp in the first place. We won't be able to move right now." "So we're sitting ducks," Asher observed, and Bones snapped, "Yeah, a duck right in front of an extremely large gun in the middle of space. It should stop fairly soon," Khan observed casually, and both Bones and Asher looked at him, Bones incredulously and Asher curiously. "Why do you say that?" Asher asked. At the same time Bones demanded, "How and why would he stop?" "Because Carol Marcus is likely on the bridge as we speak," Khan answered calmly, looking at Asher only, "and she is the Admiral's daughter." Asher's eyes widened in understanding when, just as Khan predicted, the ship suddenly stopped moving as the attack on the Enterprise ceased. Bones looked around in shock, while Khan stated calmly, "You see. You son of a," Bones began, looking relieved, but Asher interrupted as she asked with a frown, "Don't they have transporter technology nowadays? Kirk sent some guards down to fetch me earlier with that." "Yes," Khan answered briefly, and Asher asked pointedly, "So, then the Vengeance?" "Yes," Khan repeated, and Bones asked, "If you could speak so the rest of us could understand." Khan sighed impatiently as he explained shortly to the doctor, "The Admiral could easily transport his daughter back onto his ship and then resume his attack on us, destroying us all in order to remove any evidence of myself and my crew, and eradicating any witnesses to his actions." "By God," Bones groaned, while Asher noted, "You seem rather calm considering the Admiral's about to kill us all." "I am hoping," Khan informed her, and Asher asked, annoyed at his obscure manner of speaking, "Hoping?" "That the captain took my advice and had a recon team sent aboard the Vengeance about an hour or so ago," Khan replied calmly. Of course, it was at that timing that a Scottish voice called over the Enterprise comms, "Enterprise, can you hear me?" "Scotty," Jim's voice answered as the entire ship heard the broadcast, and once again Asher and Bones stared at Khan as Scotty said to Jim smugly, "Guess what I found behind Jupiter?" "You're on that ship," Jim cheered, and Khan just looked at his companions smugly. "You what?" Bones gasped, while Asher rubbed her temples and muttered, "You're going to have to elaborate on your summary from earlier." "I did say it was a long story," he reminded her, and she just gave him a deadpan look as Scotty explained to Jim, "I snuck on, and seeing as I've just committed an act of treason against a Starfleet admiral, I'd really like to get out of this bloody ship. Now, beam me out." "You're miracle worker," Jim answered, relief clear in his voice. "We're little low on power right now, just stand by, stand by." "What do you mean low on power? What happened to the Enterprise?" Scotty asked incredulously, before he added abruptly, "I'll call you back." "Scotty," Jim called, but the connection had clearly already cut. Asterisk 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 on the bridge, Jim whirled around instantly, asking his first officer, "Spock, our ship, how is she?" "Our options are limited, Captain," Spock reported back grimly. "We cannot fire and we cannot flee." Jim paused, his eyes darting around as he mulled over Spock's words before he paused. "There is one more option," he murmured, looking back at Spock. The Vulcan frowned while Jim looked over Spock's shoulder, calling to his communications officer, "Uhura, when you get Scotty back, patch him through." "Yes, sir," Uhura answered instantly, turning back to her station to keep an eye out while Jim ordered his first officer, "Mr. Spock, you have the comm." With that, he turned and hurried off the bridge, heading for the turbolift. However, Spock followed him, stepping inside the lift with Jim as he protested, "Captain, I strongly object." Jim almost sighed, but remained stoic as he questioned while the doors closed on him, "To what? I haven't said anything yet." "Since we cannot take the ship from the outside, the only way we can take it is within," Spock rattled off, "and as large boarding party would be detected, it is optimum for you take as few members of crew as possible." The lift doors opened once more as they reached a lower deck level, and Jim walked out grimly while Spock trailed after him, continuing with a hint of agitation in his monotonous voice, "You will meet resistance, requiring personnel with advanced combat abilities and innate knowledge of that ship. This indicates that you plan to align with Khan, the very man we were sent here to destroy." "I'm not aligning with him," Jim corrected grimly as they walked side by side, "I'm using him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." An Arabic proverb attributed to a prince who has been betrayed and decapitated by his own subjects, Spock pointed out, and Jim just shrugged as he quipped, "Well, still, it's a hell of quote." "I will go with you, Captain," Spock insisted, but Jim said sharply, "No, I need you on the bridge." "I cannot allow you to do this," Spock finally said, grabbing Jim and forcing him to stop, and turn, and listen. It's my function aboard this ship to advise you making the wisest decisions possible, something I firmly believe you are incapable doing in this moment." "You're right," Jim exploded back, meeting Spock's gaze dead on for the first time. Spock stared at his friend as Jim stated, "What I am about to do, it doesn't make any sense, it's not logical, it is a gut feeling." He sighed, deflating a little as he said in a calmer but more despairing tone, "I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, I only know what I can do." Spock stared as Jim added quietly, "The Enterprise and her crew needs someone in that chair who knows is doing, and that's not me." Jim looked his friend dead in the eye as he finished softly, "It's you, Spock." With that, he turned and walked away, and this time Spock didn't follow. Instead, he stared after his friend with a worried expression, his dark eyes filled with anxiety, before it filled with a grim resolve. Asterisk 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 asterisk. At the same time, in the med bay, Bones rubbed his face with his hands, before he glanced at the two augments again, where Khan was quickly filling Asher in on the finer details, especially regarding their current situation, deciding he valued his life and determining the two weren't going to cause any trouble anytime soon, at least, he hoped. Bones turned back to his analysis work. He really needed something medical to focus on before he lost his own damn mind. Meanwhile, Asher listened with a frown as Khan finished, and she nodded slowly. "Okay, I see," she sighed, ignoring as her words made Bones glance up sharply while the guards, who'd resumed their duty around the two augments, tensed. Khan seemed faintly amused at their defensiveness, but that quickly dropped as Asher looked up at him with sorrowful eyes as she murmured, "There's something else I want to ask, Khan," something Kirk said. He waited, wondering what it could be, and Asher said softly, he said, "There were only 72 torpedoes." Bones frowned in confusion while Khan's face flooded with understanding, and he sighed before Asher even finished asking in a whisper, "Who?" "Joaquin, Maria, Fulton, Gaia, Vishwa, Cameron, Juliet, Kinta, Marcel, Thompson, Tamsin," Khan listed, taking a deep breath before he finished quietly, "Rivera." Bones glanced up, watching as Asher's eyes filled with tears while Khan explained in a low voice, "Their cryotubes malfunctioned in space." He didn't say any more, he didn't have to. The redhead still looked on the verge of tears, but Asher simply nodded once before leaning her head against Khan's chest. Bones politely averted his eyes, letting him have a semblance of privacy as Khan held the young woman against him with his cuffed hands, his head bowed forward over hers protectively as she mourned their lost companions. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Year 1985. It was almost time. The augments at the facility were all growing restless, anticipation building in each person as they waited for their leader's return. The news had spread, almost silently, of course, amongst them that Khan was planning the overthrow in 2 days' time. Orders would follow upon his return the next day, after another, and, if things went according to their plan, final recon mission to a weapons branch in Iran. Soon, the augments stirred amongst themselves eagerly. Soon, they would be free. Katie, one of the ones chosen to remain behind at the facility this time, met the eyes of the only human-turned-augment currently at the facility. A pretty blonde with a figure akin to a supermodel, Rivera had been the first human to successfully emerge from the conversion process into an almost augment, but she had been timid, confused by her new body and intellect, and overwhelmed by the ferocity of the group she had been thrown into. It hadn't been long before she'd broken. But there had been no pity in her fellow group. Instead, her weakness created contempt, even from those who had not been bothered to try to break her. And when the pattern repeated itself with the next human-turned-augment, Daniel Katzel, the belittling term, half-human, came to be. Sometimes, Katie wondered what would have happened if Asher hadn't come along. Would Khan have bothered to include the human-turned-augments into his team if Asher hadn't been there, or would he have killed them as weaker beings, the way he planned to kill the scientists in the Chrysalis project? Before, perhaps, the thought would never have bothered her. Now, Katie winced and recoiled from the mere thought. Rivera and Daniel were one of them now, just as Asher was. Yes, they were technically weaker than augments, but they were not weak. Asher had proven that, and with the encouraging boost her example had provided, both Daniel and Rivera had soon proven their worth as well. They were strong too, just in different ways. As Katie was stronger than Otto in different ways, they were not all so different after all. Rivera grinned at Katie now, a quick flash of teeth that almost any normal human would have missed. Katie's lips curled in an answering smirk, also too quick for the human eye, but Rivera's eyes gleaming with amusement told her the human augment had seen it. Soon, yes, soon they would all be free.